The sun rises over the Mekong Delta. In a clearing surrounded by water stands a tiny, primitive leaf hut. No electricity, no running water. Cough! Cough! Smoke billows out of the small window. Inside, James is on his knees. His expensive Armani shirt is unbuttoned and covered in black soot. Sweat pours down his face. He blows frantically into a clay stove, trying to light damp coconut husks. "Burn, damn you," James mutters, eyes stinging. He strikes another match. It fizzles out. He negotiates million-dollar mergers, but he cannot boil a pot of water. Behind him, sitting on a bamboo bed, Diep watches. She wears simple floral pajamas. She looks rested. She giggles. James turns around, face streaked with ash like a commando. "It's not funny. The wood is wet." "It's not the wood," Diep slides off the bed. "Move over, Mr. CEO." She gently pushes him aside. She arranges the husks in a triangle, leaving a gap for air. She strikes one match. Whoosh! The fire catches instantly. James stares at the fire, betrayed. It likes you better. It respects technique. Diep smiles, wiping soot off his nose. "Go wash your face. I'll cook." "No," James grabs her hand. "You rest. I cook. I promised." He sits her back down. "Rice and... what is that?" He points to a basket of river fish. "Snakehead fish," Diep says. "You have to clean it." James picks up the slippery fish. It flops in his hands. He yelps and drops it in the mud. Diep laughs again, clutching her belly. "Our child will starve if we wait for you." The sun is high and blazing hot. James walks delicately across a monkey bridge, a single bamboo pole spanning a muddy creek. He balances 2 buckets of water on a shoulder pole. His legs shake. The bamboo bends. "Don't look down," he whispers. "It's just a balance beam." He takes a step. The water sloshes. The rhythm throws him off. Splash! James slips. He drops the buckets and hugs the bamboo pole, dangling upside down over the brown water. "James!" Diep calls from the bank. "I'm fine!" James yells, face turning red as he hangs on. "This is tactical training." He shimmies backward, mud soaking his trousers, until he reaches solid ground. He collapses, panting. Diep rushes over with a towel. She sees a scrape on his arm. "You're bleeding," she says, voice trembling. "Let me get the water." "No." James sits up, grabbing the buckets again. He looks at her swollen belly. "I carry the water. You carry the baby. That's the deal." He stands up, legs trembling, and glares at the bridge. Round 2. Evening falls. The hut is lit by a single kerosene lamp. Dinner is served. It is a disaster. The rice is burnt at the bottom and soggy at the top. The fish is charred black on the outside and raw on the inside. James sits on the floor looking at the food with shame. He wanted to give her a feast. He gave her charcoal. "I'm sorry," James whispers. "It's inedible." Diep picks up a piece of the burnt fish. She blows on it and eats it. She chews slowly. "It's crispy," she says, smiling, "and it's the best meal I've ever had." James looks at her. He knows she is lying, but her eyes are shining. "Why?" he asks. "Because no one ever cooked for me," Diep says softly. "I was always the servant. Today you served me." James feels a lump in his throat. He picks up his bowl and eats the burnt rice. It tastes like smoke and failure, but sitting here with her, it tastes like victory. "Tomorrow," James vows, "I will catch a chicken, a big one." Night. The jungle comes alive with crickets and frogs. They lie together on the narrow bamboo bed. It is hard. James has laid his suit jacket under Diep's back for padding. James cannot sleep. He slaps his arm. Slap. He hears a high-pitched whine near Diep's ear. Mosquitoes. He sits up. The net Vance provided has a hole in it. Diep twitches in her sleep as a mosquito lands on her cheek. James doesn't wake her. He finds a large palm leaf fan. For the next 4 hours, the billionaire sits cross-legged in the dark. He fans her rhythmically. Swish, swish. His arm aches. His back screams. He is exhausted, dirty, and hungry. But he watches Diep breathe. He watches her hand resting on her stomach. He leans down and kisses her forehead. "I'll build you a palace," he whispers. "But for now, I'll be your fan." Suddenly, a loud splash comes from the river. James freezes. He stops fanning. Another splash. Then wood bumping against wood. Someone is at the dock. James blows out the lamp. The hut plunges into darkness. He grabs a heavy piece of firewood. He moves to the door, peering through the cracks. A flashlight beam cuts through the darkness, sweeping over their hut. "Is anyone there?" A rough voice calls out. James grips the wood. He looks back at Diep. She is still sleeping. He steps outside, closing the door silently. He stands in the mud, shirtless, ready to fight the world with a stick. The flashlight hits his face. James doesn't blink. "Who goes there?" James growls, voice dangerous. The light lowers. A local fisherman stands in a boat. He holds up a large basket. I have the chickens Vance ordered," the man stammers, intimidated. "And extra mosquito nets." James lets out a breath. He drops the wood. His knees almost buckle. "Leave them," James whispers hoarsely. "And go quietly. My wife is sleeping." The fisherman nods, leaves the basket on the dock, and paddles away quickly. James walks to the basket. Inside, 2 fat hens are clucking, and a brand new hole-free net. He smiles, a real smile. He picks up the basket and walks back to the hut. He has food, he has protection, and he has her. Tomorrow he learns how to kill a chicken, but tonight he won. James hangs the new net quietly. He crawls back into bed next to Diep. She stirs, turning to face him. Her hand finds his face in the dark. "You smell like smoke," she murmurs sleepily. "I'm practicing," James whispers, pulling her close. "Practicing what?" "Being a husband," James says. Diep buries her face in his chest. "You're doing good." She falls back asleep. James closes his eyes. The floor is hard, his stomach is empty, and he has lost everything he once owned. But listening to the rhythmic breathing of his wife and unborn child, James realizes something terrifying. He has never been happier. Morning breaks. James sits on the bamboo steps, counting money. 200,000 dong. That's it. He checks his wallet. Platinum cards, VIP memberships, all useless plastic scrap here. Inside, Diep shifts in her sleep, murmuring about sour soup, a pregnancy craving. James clenches his jaw. He needs tamarind, pineapple, and fresh fish. He needs cash. He stands up, rolls up the sleeves of his stained Armani shirt, and walks toward the village. The village rice mill is loud and dusty. Machines roar. James walks up to the foreman, a burly man. "I need work," James shouts. The foreman looks him up and down. He sees the expensive fabric, the smooth skin. "You?" The foreman laughs. "You look like a pop star. What can you do?" "I can lift," James says. "I'm strong." "Show me." The foreman points to a mountain of 50 kilos rice sacks. "Load that truck. 5,000 dong per sack." James walks to the first sack. He bends his knees, grabs the corners, and heaves. It is unbelievably heavy. The rough burlap scrapes his neck. His knees buckle. "Too heavy, Prince?" The foreman sneers. James grits his teeth. He thinks of Diep craving soup. He roars, a primal sound, and swings the sack onto his shoulder. He staggers toward the truck. He drops it. He goes back for another. The other workers stop to watch. The prince is actually working. Back at the hut, Diep wakes up alone. She sees a note. "Gone to explore. Back by lunch." She sighs. She looks at the pile of coconut leaves outside. The neighbor taught her how to weave thatch roofing. "I can do this," she whispers. She sits on the porch, picking up a sharp knife. She starts splitting the leaves. Her back aches, but she weaves. 1 sheet, 2 sheets, slice. The knife slips. Diep gasps, dropping the blade. A deep cut across her thumb. Blood drips onto the green leaf. She grabs a rag, wrapping it tight. "Stupid," she scolds herself, fighting back tears. She looks at the unfinished roof. She wants to be a partner, not a burden. She picks up the knife again with her uninjured hand. Noon at the mill. The sun is a hammer. James is shirtless. His skin is sunburnt red. His shoulder is raw, the skin rubbed off by the coarse sacks. He is trembling. He has carried 50 sacks. The lunch whistle blows. The foreman hands him a styrofoam box. Worker's lunch, included in the pay. James opens it. A large chicken drumstick and steaming rice. His stomach roars. He lifts the spoon. Then he stops. He remembers Diep's plain congee breakfast. He closes the box. He wraps it carefully in a plastic bag. "Not hungry?" a worker asks. "Saving it," James croaks, drinking water. "My wife, she likes chicken." Sunset. James walks back to the hut with a limp. Every muscle screams. He stops at the village market. He takes out his earnings. 250,000 dong. He buys tamarind, pineapple, tomatoes, herbs, and fresh milk. He has 50,000 left. He sees a stall selling plastic hair clips. He sees a blue one with a butterfly. He buys it. His wallet is empty again, but his bag is full. James enters the hut, trying to stand straight. "I'm back," he calls out. Diep is waiting, hiding her bandaged hand behind her back. "Where were you?" she asks, looking at his sunburned face. "Just walking," James lies. "Met some locals. They gave me ingredients for sour soup." He puts the bag on the table. He takes out the lunchbox. "And they gave me chicken. I already ate. This is for you." Diep opens the box. The food is cold, but smells wonderful. She looks at James. She sees the dust in his hair. She sees him flinch when he moves his arm. She walks to him. She unbuttons his shirt. "Diep, I'm fine." James tries to pull away. "Stop," she orders. She pulls the shirt down. She gasps. His shoulder is a mess of raw flesh and bruises. The prince's skin has been shredded. Diep covers her mouth. Tears spill. "You worked," she whispers. "You went to the mill." James looks down. "I needed money. For the soup." Diep hits his chest lightly, sobbing. "You idiot. I don't need soup. I need you whole." She pulls him to the bed. She finds the jar of tiger balm. She applies the ointment. James hisses in pain but leans into her touch. "Look at your hand." James grabs her wrist. He sees the bandage. "I tried to weave," Diep admits. "I wanted to fix the roof." James kisses her bandaged thumb. Diep kisses his bruised shoulder. They sit there, battered and broken, surviving on blood and sweat. James reaches into his pocket. He pulls out the blue butterfly clip. "For you," he says. Diep freezes. She touches the cheap plastic clip like it is a diamond. "It's beautiful," she cries, letting him clip it into her hair. "Eat the chicken," James says, "before it gets cold." Diep sits on the floor. She tears the drumstick in half. "Open your mouth," she says to James. "I said I ate." "Open," Diep commands. "We share, 50-50, always." James opens his mouth. She feeds him. He chews, realizing he is starving. They eat the cold lunch together. Outside, the wind rustles the new thatch Diep wove. James looks at his wife. She has a bandage on her hand and a cheap plastic butterfly in her hair. She is eating rice with her fingers. "Tomorrow," James says, "I go back. I can do 100 sacks." "Tomorrow," Diep says, "I finish the roof." They look at each other and smile. They are a team, and for the first time in their lives, they are free.
Trốn về một túp lều lá giữa đồng giam lần đầu đối diện đời sống nghèo khó, nhóm bếp không lên, nấu cơm cháy khét, cá thì sống, suýt rơi xuống cầu khỉ gánh nước. Tất cả chỉ vì muốn tự tay nấu cho Diệp đang mang thai. Ban đêm anh ngồi một chỗ quạt cho cô, trải áo vest làm đệm, coi việc bảo vệ vợ con là nhiệm vụ duy nhất. Sáng hôm sau, Diêm lặng lẽ ra nhà máy xay lúa xin bốc phát từng bao gạo nặng 50 kg để kiếm tiền mua đồ nấu canh chua cho Diệp. Trong khi đó, Diệp cũng cố tự đan mái nhà, bị đứt tay nhưng không bỏ cuộc. Khi gặp lại, cả hai phát hiện những hy sinh thầm lặng của nhau. Họ chia đôi một phần cơm gà nguội, băng bó cho nhau và mỉm cười. Giữa nhiều khó và thương tích, họ lần đầu cảm thấy mình là một gia đình thực sự tự do và gắn bó.